Good evening, folks. Hello, Chris. Hello, Ken. Thanks for joining us for this online book launch of the book, 16 Years, Gigs in Scotland, 1974 to 1990. Compiled by Chris Brickley, who's here tonight, who'll be in discussion with Ken McCluskey. So some housekeeping though. This has been recorded on Zoom. It's going out in live stream on Facebook. Chris and Ken will talk for about 40 minutes or so, and that includes a whiz through a lot of the images in the book. So photography will be driving this along very nicely. We'll have questions at the end for 15 minutes or so. So we're looking about an hour in total time. It might slip a little bit. And if it does, it's for good reason, but it won't be much longer than that. You can ask questions in writing in the chat function of the Facebook page here. You can do that at any time throughout the talk or at the time of the Q&A when it'll be passed over to Chris and Ken. We're at the service and the mercy of technology here, so if there's any bandwidth problems, and anything freezes, just stick with it, and one or more of us will be back. So maybe a good place to start. Chris will give us a description of the book very shortly, but I'd just like to quickly quote the writer Ian Rankin, who did the foreword in the book, when he said that it's a treasure trove of concert memories from Scotland's rock music past. A trip down memory lane for many of us. It's also an invaluable guide to a lost world of venues, bands, fashions, and moments in time. What the book emphasises for me, Chris, is yet again that the camera is an archiving tool, and that photography in its forms of display, whether that's an exhibition or a book, are mediums that bring that back to life for existing in new audiences. So it's part of our social and cultural history, that's very important. It's also a great example of vernacular photography, I think. Photographs capturing everyday life, and of course music and culture is very much a part of who we are in terms of forming our identity. The geographical reach of the photographs is quite significant here, and I think you will talk about that very shortly indeed. But just to introduce the both of you, Ken McCluskey is a musician, the Bluebells, the McCluskey Brothers, other bands you've played in, Ken. You lecture in music business, Glasgow Kelvin College. You're a mentor at Electric Honey Records, which of course is a label that does an awful lot in supporting new young talent. Ken's worked quite extensively with us, you know, in 2012 co-curated the Harry Papadopoulos exhibition, which of course has been in circulation ever since in various iterations, and its most recent smaller survey of the Scottish acts is on at the Beacon Arts Centre in Greenock, which is a town that also features in the book. Previously, it had been in Dumfries and Berlin simultaneously a couple of years ago, been all over the place. Live gigs seem to be a thing, kind of feels it's a thing of the past, but in actual fact, Ken will be playing a gig with the Bluebells on Sunday with Lola and Slacks. I think maybe safe to say the first live public gig since this whole episode began. So look it up. But Ken, give that a plug towards the end again, could you, in terms of last night?
I don't worry.
Yeah. So the other contributor here, of course, is Chris Brickley. So congratulations to Chris for pulling this book together. And also belated happy birthday, which was yesterday.
It was, yes.
I do believe. Yeah, 21 again.
21 again.
Yeah, so you describe yourself as a lifelong music fan, and that's quite evident by what the results are It's crystal clear in this book.
Yeah.
You've worked in fine art for the last 25 years. You run the website Scott's Gigs Relived, which might say is possibly the source of the river which has flowed into this book.
Yep.
I think you got in touch in late 2018, Chris, when you were looking for images of Harry Papadopoulos to include in the book, which you will touch upon with Ken during the talk. And so since then, you've been working on it through a crowdfunding campaign. In 2019, you were able to go ahead and publish. In early 2020, we had discussed a public launch in real life at street level itself, but lockdown then happened, and it's not possible for us as a public gallery to really host that. Yeah. Hence, this online event itself, which currently has 119 people attending, I should say.
Fantastic.
Look. You have had a few social launches, one at McCluskey in Glasgow and one at the Bungalow in Paisley, and a few others as well. So I'm going to hand it over to you guys to kick out the jams, as the MC5 would say. I'll disappear for a bit and then come back in a bit later. So take it away, Ken.
Thanks, Malcolm.
Hi. Hi, everyone who's joined us. Thanks for joining us. Chris, I'd just like to start off just kind of general, just to sort of cover a few things. We've got a lovely image up here. I'm sure you can all see it, but just a wee bit of background in the book for those who maybe don't know the story. When did you actually get the idea of the book, and what was it you wanted to achieve initially?
I would say, hi, Ken. Evening, everyone else. I would say it's 4 or 5 years, Ken. I had some photographs and memorabilia of my own, and some friends had other better stuff. And I thought, well, wouldn't it be good to compile something? Because it was my fear that the kind of material that we focus on in the book was in danger of being lost, because gig photographs and photographs of people's social lives are so easily mislaid in house moves, or they get damp, or they get chucked out. So I wanted to try and gather some of that material together. So I did a Facebook page for a couple of years to try and build an audience with a view to doing that. So, but it's taken 2 years pretty much to put the book together.
Mm-hmm. So did you find that once the people start offering stuff, or did you find people wanted to hold on to their stuff, or were they quite free giving you?
Well, I mean, yes.
Passing on stuff? Memorabilia.
It was generally received as a good idea when I suggested it, but when I asked people to send stuff, inevitably it was a wee bit of a trickle at the start. But quite early on in the process, I heard from a guy called Ross in Edinburgh, who sent me one Saturday morning. I was getting email after email, and Ross and his pals were among the first wave of punks in Edinburgh. We're going to places like Clouds and the Astoria and Tiffany's, the university, and they took turns to take cameras to gigs, and they took an amazing group of photographs of the early punk gigs, which are really rare, as you know. Nobody did that in those days. So once I had those, I thought that is a proper core group of material to hang it on. And after that, it really was, people did send me things, and they've been really good and really generous, but it was a lot of evenings at the kitchen table after my work, going through social media and doing Google searches, because once you have a good group, then you need stuff to go around it, and it was a case of finding things and asking for permission. So it was quite laborious, but I'm pleased with the way it's panned out.
Yeah, it's fascinating. When I picked up the book, and when I was looking through it, I was going to say, well, I'll do it in a couple of sittings, but I didn't. I did it in a one. But it took me I had a wee snooze in between, not because the content was boring, but because I was knackered. But I did it in about 4 hours.
Yeah,
4 hours, because I was looking at like the prices of tickets and what time, and I was getting mixed up with certain things. You know, there was quite a few Clash gigs around about 77, 78, and I was thinking, was that one, or who supported that band? And was it Suicide and the Specials, or was it Richard Hell, or But it was fascinating. It was amazing. It was a real great thing for jogging memories, and because sometimes you think you made things up. It was really excellent. So it's a fantastic book.
Thank you.
I really love the way, unusually, it's done. Through towns, alphabetically through towns, and it's not only the major towns.
Yeah.
Edinburgh, Glasgow, Aberdeen, Dundee. It's Bells Hill, it's Grangemouth, it's Greenock, it's Gourock. It's fab.
Yeah.
I really, really like that. Because when I think of, especially the kind of punk times, when I started going to gigs, like in 1977, I'd be 15, so it was a perfect age for going to gigs and all that. I found it was where suburban. I'm from Bothwell, Lanarkshire, but on the train or the bus, you would get more people going on at stops, and you would recognise them by a badge or a sign, a haircut or something like that, and you would think, I bet you they're going to this gig. And then all of a sudden, you were in the city. Glasgow for me was our biggest city. So then it was where we interacted. So suburbans all of a sudden interacted with real Glaswegians. People from the city. Yeah. And then you would meet people north, south, east, west. So it was a really brilliant thing. You meet at a record shop, or one of the many record shops that we were very fortunate to have, like Bruce's or Listen or whatever. Yeah. And which nicely takes me to this fantastic photograph.
Yes.
That we have here.
Very much so.
Where did you get this? Where did you get this photograph? It's fantastic.
Well, that's the great thing about social media, is things pop up now and again. And I had seen this picture, and you'll know better than I the significance of the bandstand at Custom House Quay. Not just, obviously it's a structure that people know, but it had a significance at that punk period and post-punk as a meeting place. And then there was a series of gigs, wasn't there? Around about 79, would you say?
Yeah, this looks about 1979, 1980. But I was this bandstand, which was at Custom House Quay. Somebody very cleverly got permission to use it from Glasgow City Council, and it was set up for Rock Against Racism. Yeah. And anti-apartheid gigs, etc. And I think it was the guys the Paisley-based guys, sort of Groucho Marxist label. Yeah. And they had all sorts of bands that were on the label and played there. There was the Fegs and Defiant Pose and Excess Discharge and the Fire Exit. And there was a band called the Zips playing one day. John Zips still playing with the Zips. Very nice man. And we went up, we were cheeky wee boys from Bothwell. Nice, polite boys, of course. Punk rockers. Clean punks. And posh punks. And we went to the guy, John from the Zips, and said, we're in a band, can we use your instruments and get a gig with you? And he went, no bother. What a brilliant guy. So he's maybe a couple of years older than me. Fantastic. And he gave us the instruments, and then that started a long run of gigs every Saturday at Custom House Quay on that bandstand. And it was fantastic. It was really, really brilliant. So you'd have all these, and then there's a great wee amphitheatre there, and then people would just come down, and then you get people maybe working offices come down for lunch, and then you get all the sort of punks. The word would go around the record shops that there's a gig on, down the Custom House Quay. But there's a few guys I know in this picture here. The girl far right, this girl called Carol Rafferty. She's an actress now, and she's a sister of a king punk, Frank Rafferty. I think he was Bearstein or Bishop Briggs. I think it was Bearstein. He's a poet now. Now. The wee guy with the baby face to the left, behind the three on the left, is a guy called Giggles. He was from the Gorbals. Right. Just over the river from the bandstand. He's a head nurse at the Royal Infirmary now. Oh, wow. And there's a guy there, Dennis, in the middle. I don't really know. I know the rest of their faces, but I couldn't put names to them. But maybe somebody who's watching this could put names to them and maybe tell us where they are or whatever. Sure. But it's a brilliant photograph. I mean, imagine trying to actually capture that guy doing that jump, that scissor kick. It would be absolutely impossible. Yeah, very much. But this is one of the things when Malcolm was talking about the importance of the camera. people really didn't walk about with cameras then. Now everybody's got a phone, so you take pictures of anything, like TikTok or whatever, and oh, there's a funny cat or whatever, But people didn't really have, because it would be quite an expensive thing to develop photographs. A lot of people didn't develop photographs. They had to go to boots or whatever, so it'd be quite expensive. So it was maybe something you would do on your holidays or whatever. But thank God people did walk about with cameras. There was enthusiasts there. And then there was some people that was just the introduction to disposable cameras as well. But that's a brilliant photograph. I love that.
It is. And in a way, it was a gift to start things off. And given that I'm speaking to you, John Sturrock, I mean, the main thrust of the book is, as I say, collecting together unpublished amateur, what I've called crowd shots. But John Sturrock is a professional photographer, Glasgow, London-based now. And you can see that in the way that the photograph is. It's a very sophisticated the geometry of the structure. And these pyramids of figures. It's really clever and really effective. It's just a great image. So I thought a great place to start. And as you say, as a meeting place, and
it's a fantastic one to start.
Yeah, and the nature of music and gathering and people from different parts of the city or beyond coming in together. You can see here, as we mentioned yesterday or earlier in the week, the Rock Against Racism T-shirts and badges and things. So these were the means by which folk recognised each other. And that's still the early punk look, isn't it? It might be 79, but that's still kind of looks like the first wave, doesn't it? And
I think the guy Dennis, I think Dennis, the one in the middle with the 1 foot up, I think he's got on a T-shirt which is, it's not Rock Against Racism, it's Anti-Nazi League, I think. Yeah, he's got the arrow.
Absolutely, yes.
So it's quite good to look at.
Absolutely. Yeah. So shall we move on? Let's hope.
Yes.
Now, this is a classic again. It's really what the book's about. It's a favourite of mine. This is George's photograph. And there's a nice wee story. Again, it's only about a year later than the previous one, but you can see the whole look has changed. George certainly was and is a biker, and you can see that feeding into the punk iconography and the look. But he'd got a camera, he told me, a new camera, and he was in town with his pals. They put the camera on the timer, sitting on a beer keg, and the boys walked round the corner, and it's near the Apollo, and they just took that fantastic photograph. So it's sort of definition of street photography. It's near the Apollo and where 23rd Precinct was. I just think it's a great image and a classic of its type. So that's the sort of thing that I was looking for when I was putting the book together. And again, as an image I would have come across on Facebook and contacted George and had a chat with him. And here we are. So these two photographs to start as are a bit of a kind of, to show the range of the book, if you like.
Yeah, it's super. I know George quite well. He lives in Partick, just up the road from me where I live now. Right. And he's still about, and he's still all the biker's gear and all that. Yeah. He's a good pal. He worked in the Volcano for quite a long time. Remember the Volcano? It was the pub in Trainspotting. He worked there for a while. I recognise all the other guys, but I couldn't put a name to them. So again, if anyone, they were all quite well-known faces, the kind of punk scene at the time. Right. If anyone knows any of these guys, or they're whereabouts, we're not looking for them or whatever. But if there's maybe somebody who's in the photograph is listening, or whatever, or if there's anything to say, I would actually say that was a year before that last photograph.
Would you like to tell us that?
I'll tell you why. I think so. Yeah, I think so. I think it was. George was always very stylized, sort of punk. The other guys were kind of, because there was kind of different degrees of punk. There was kind of London punks, and then there was Paddy's Market punks, and Oxfam Warriors, and all sorts of different, different tribes within the sort of punk thing, I suppose. Yeah. But I think that might have been a wee bit earlier. But I don't mean a lot earlier, maybe 6 months or a year earlier or something like that.
I think that's a really important point you raised there, Ken. And anyone who's interested in music and punk will know these London images and, the kind of Bromley Contingent and the 100 Club and the Roxy. But what I wanted to get at is that, how did things look here? And we were talking the other day about the Clash film Rude Boy, and there's the scene at the Glasgow Apollo outside, and the camera pans along the queue, and it's all these kids, young kids, and it's quite Dickensian in a way, that ripped up school uniforms and chains and cheap plastic sunglasses, and that is how it looked in the middle of '78 when it was a big movement. as opposed to a small clique where everybody knew each other. And that's what I wanted to kind of show, because it's a book about, to my mind, it's the interesting thing is that it's the human interest and the venues. The bands are the vehicle, but it's about people really in a way of a social life that in some ways has gone. People still go to gigs, but not in the way that folk did in the 70s and 80s. Yeah. Don't you think?
I think it's very interesting as well. But if you look at that, the queue, we could talk about that later as well, the Rude Boy film that was outside the Apollo's 1978. There's loads of really young kids, 15, 16. So loads of those kids would sneak out the house and put a safety pin in their jacket or something like that. You know what I mean? Or put their jacket on inside out or something like that. You know, or indeed a Moz jacket or something like that. You know, so I quite like that kind of handmade DIY thing. You know, that was it was very easy to be a punk. Yeah, you know, I mean, you didn't have to dress out of boy or whatever seditionaries or something like that. You could just wear an old man's suit or something, a dead man's suit and a badge. You know, that would be punk. You know.
Definitely.
So there was all different. I liked that, the idea that people just made up their own style. It was great.
Yeah, much more interesting. So what we're going to do now, having had a couple of introductory slides, I wanted the book to start before punk. And if you're going to do that, I chose 74 for various reasons. But and of course, a landmark gig in Glasgow that year would be Lou Reed. He's always on the radar, isn't he? That's around about the rock and roll animal period. And Vin Miles is a London-based guy who followed the tour around and photographed various shows. And here we are at the Apollo. So that would be a big one of that pre-punk period. And obviously a major figure that you would want to have in a book like this. So it took me a wee while to find and get in touch with him, but I'm very glad that I did.
Yeah.
Another one.
Lou Reed kind of informed the whole punk thing, didn't he? You know, the sort of the kind of whole artistic sort of 3-chord job, you know.
Yeah, and that look that he had at that time with the bleached hair and the
Sally Can't Dance, yeah. Sally Can't Dance or Berlin, I think something like that. Sorry,
way ahead of his time, wasn't he? And of course, Mr. Bowie just transcends everything in terms of, one of the major cultural figures of the century. And again, somebody would want, and he played, was it 4 nights at the Apollo on that tour? Because even by then, he was a bit tired of touring.
I think it was, yeah.
So, and John Higney, a great guy we had at the McCool's launch, had a nice chat with John. He went to, I think, 3 out of the 4 gigs and was at different parts of the theatre each night and took these tremendous pictures. And again, trying to get a camera into the Apollo was a risky business, wasn't it? And even if you did, it was a big theatre. The lighting was tricky. It was very difficult to get good photos. So it's amazing that we have these. And again, these are things.
Quite brave. It'd be quite a brave thing. And sorry. And I think we kind of mentioned it earlier. This must have been taken because the big high stage, the Apollo. So you couldn't, it was hard to get a good image or whatever. So this must have been taken in one of the wee boxes. You know, if you look at the stage, on the left-hand side, there was kind of boxes. Just the same level as the circle. So that's probably taken from the left-hand side, looking onto the stage there. Yeah. Because that would be brave. Yeah, you'd get chopped out for that, I think.
Oh, aye.
There's a notorious bouncer at the Apollo. He wore a pink shirt.
Right. Yeah.
Bad guy. But that's it. I'm not going to go any further in case he bars me.
And Bowie was back at the Apollo apparently in the following year in '79, played keyboards for Iggy with a hood up, incognito. So the story goes.
All right, brilliant.
But yeah, you need Lou and you need Bowie. Now, this brings us to the punk. The main thrust of the book, again, is punk and post-punk. And the Clash are always up there, aren't they, at the top? And they toured relentlessly. And this tour in '78 was a landmark with Suicide and the Coventry Automatics, who became the Specials. And they played Glasgow, they played Edinburgh, they played the Kinema in Dunfermline, which was a major venue of that period. And this was a particularly violent gig by all accounts. And a number of these were captured in the Clash film, The Rude Boy, that we we talked about earlier. And again, this is just a classic on the spot, what I've called crowd shot. But and the great thing about these is the immediacy. They put you right on the spot, in front of the performer, and you get a sense of the atmosphere to a great degree. And I love this is the Clash just as they become the biggest thing, really, isn't it?
Yeah. So that was weird. That was an amazing gig. That with the I was at the Kinema, but I was at the Glasgow Apollo on this tour, and we'll maybe talk about suicide and all that later on. Yeah. But to get so close, it would be really hard. You know, not unless you had a real good camera with a zoom lens. You know, but I don't think there would be many zoom lenses at gigs at that point. But that's really up close. I was never in the Kinema myself, but maybe again, if somebody's from Dunfermline or they're at the gig, they could maybe talk about that gig and was it extremely violent? You know, I think there was a wee thing about, because the punk thing, a lot of the established kind of bouncers had to go to sort of bouncer training school for one day at that time, and you know they weren't really trained to deal with kids. You know, that was the idea of you just gave them a slap down the back of the head or kicked them up the arse or whatever, you know. Which wouldn't be allowed now, of course. No. But and you did get many a kick up the arse and maybe a slap down the back of the head, but they were rough, man. They were really rough, especially when you're a wee boy of 15. You know, there's no weight to you. I saw many a doing from the Glasgow bouncers. They were rough. They're not like that now, of course.
Of course not.
In fact, what are bouncers doing during lockdown? There'll be nothing to bounce.
Oh, I know.
Will there? When you think about it, there's no gigs.
And of course, that's the thing about the Apollo is you could get in as a school kid because it was unlicensed, wasn't it? People might not realise that. So the punk crowd would be very young in a venue like the Apollo. Less so probably at the Kinema, but again, as I've said, there was a lot of strife at that one, and that wasn't unusual for those times for various reasons.
Yeah. But we used to buy tickets. It was about £2.50 to go and see the Clash, if I remember correctly. And we used to buy tickets for £1.75, and for the circle, and then they were the same colour as the ones for the stalls. So we used to just go to the toilet and put the way back down, just jump to the stalls, thereby saving 75p, which is very important.
Oh yes,
when you live in both of them.
Oh yes. So what we got next? Well, we mentioned when I got in touch with you.
Here we go. Now you're talking.
Yeah. When I got in touch with you first, Ken, and I wanted to just test the water because I had a good body of material of the amateur type, and I thought, well, I'd test the water and see if I could get one or two images of Harry's, because obviously I had the catalogue and I'd seen the exhibition, and top of my list was this photograph because of the mythology of the gig, first of all, and the importance of that tour to musicians and fans, because by the middle of 78, as we said, it was a massive deal, punk. And for a band like the Clash, you were pretty fearless in choosing their support acts. But the crowd, were not tolerant in the sense that they were just desperate to see the Clash, so it wouldn't have mattered what else you put. It's a bit like watching Slade in their heyday, so nobody was going to get a listen. But Suicide were so confrontational, weren't they?
Yeah, they were on to rice. I was at that gig, and first of all, you had the Coventry Specials, and who turned into the Specials, as you said, or the Coventry Automatics. There's a deal about whether the Coventry Specials or the Coventry Automatics. They were both basically, right. And when they played, they were not bothered. They weren't rude boys. They didn't have on all the sharp suits and the two-tone gear and all that. They were just a bunch of guys. They just looked like a bunch of guys who couldn't really be bothered. And did some nice songs. There was a couple of kind of reggae type songs. But they'd no real kind of major style. So people were like, "What's this?" and not really bothered. They went down okay. They went down quite well, but no big deal. And then these guys came on. Yeah. And I just reminded myself when they come on. There's a great website called the Barrowlands, or we played the Barrows or Barrowlands gigs, something like that. It's brilliant, and it's got wee reports on all the gigs. And there's a really good report about the Specials, and it's as I remember it. They walked on and they turned on their synthesizer, hanging the drum machine. It was hugely loud. It was massive. And this Gallus wee guy walks on, and he was kind of taunting the crowd. and the crowd just did not know what to do because it was quite a young crowd. They'd never heard anything like this. This wee guy was absolutely brilliant. He was fantastic, and you know, he kind of wound the crowd up. And there was a bit in the report in the Barrowlands page that says they started getting a slow hand clap, but then he started clapping along with it, with the slow hand clap. So the crowd stopped hand clapping, and then he was just winding them up. It was brilliant. It was absolutely fantastic.
Reveling in it.
Performance, really brilliant. It was only about 20 minutes, but I think the claps turned to boos, and people like F off, or can I swear? F off. You know, that kind of thing. But it was, I was kind of bemused, but it was amazing. I didn't really know what I'd seen. But afterwards, I bought the records. I bought the records, you know, Cherie, and all that's great.
That's it. And you could just see he's not fazed by it, really. He's bringing it on and leaning out over the. Because you need to. Brilliant.
Yeah. Well, these guys have been going since really late 60s, early 70s, you know, so they've played in all the shitholes and up and down the New York, you know, all these places. So they were probably, that was part of the show. Yeah, you know, part of the show was probably a wind up. To be subversive, but it was really amazing. He was a brilliant frontman.
And Harry's just caught that mood there, hasn't he? That kind of glare into the space of the theatre.
Perfect. He's kind of goading the audience. He's kind of saying, "Is that the best you've got?" Yeah, wee pricks. You know, it's great. It really captures it. It's great. And
there's a nice wee postscript to that. I was reading the liner notes of their second album, and an interview Alan Vega goes, "You know, the first time we ever realised that kids were actually into what we were doing and dancing was Edinburgh Tiffany's on the following tour." So that was the kind of reception they got every night. And it was actually an Edinburgh gig where things had moved on enough for people to have the language to understand what they were trying to do. And that's quite a nice wee thing for Edinburgh.
Yeah, and I think Edinburgh is maybe a different entity. Edinburgh was always maybe a wee bit more open to sort of more artsy stuff.
Yeah.
You know, maybe more, it took us a wee bit longer to maybe appreciate the kind of more arty, electronic-y stuff. We were more sort of guitars, sort of.
And it was the next tour anyway. Stuff had moved on. Wait, what we got next? Well, here we are, back in Glasgow. And I said at the start I wanted to capture how things looked on the streets, as it were, of Scotland. And we're going right back to when the group of punks in Glasgow are, as in this case, this is the Bells Hill contingent of Glasgow punks, 1977, at a jam gig at Zhivago's in St Enoch Square, the Jam and the Jolt. And Peter MacArthur has very kindly given us a group of these photographs of the early punks in Glasgow. And as we said, it's a very small group of people who would all have known each other, met at gigs such as they were at that stage, because that's early days. And I just thought, well, isn't that fantastic to see, you know, that's how it was at that time, at that gig. So terrific to have.
Let's go back to that kind of suburban thing as well, you know, the sort of great urban area, conurbation, whatever you want to call it, Bells Hill, Coatbridge, Motherwell, they all kind of run into each other. Bells Hill was quite happening at that time, because my older sister introduced me to punk, actually. She introduced me to the Clash first album and 2/7 Clash by the Culture. And she had that haircut, you know, the ponytail at the one side and all that, which she would put in when she left, when she left the house, and then she would change outside, you know, because she wouldn't be allowed out being a probably. It was okay for us guys, but I think it was harder for girls, you know, maybe to be a bit, you know, a bit over the top or outre or whatever. But Bells Hill was a really happening place. They had a punk and reggae night in the Hatton Rig Hotel.
Right.
Before the Bells Hill scene, before the fan club and all that. But there was loads of punks and all that, and they also had. And people would go to, like my sister would go to the Hatton Rig. She would also go to the Wisher, the Crown Hotel in Wisher. You'd have the Jolt and all these bands. I think James King played there with the Backstabbers. Fun Four. But so there was a big scene out there. There's a big scene out there. So it wasn't always. This is what I love about the book. It's not all city. You know, it's not all city Glasgow. Because every band's called a Glasgow band. You know, most bands aren't from Glasgow, they're from the suburbs, you know. Come on, the suburbs. That's
exactly. That's a very good point. And ultimately, the story of the book is not Glasgow and Edinburgh. I mean, they are the main focal point because most of the big... But it's no surprise Glasgow and Edinburgh had the main bands and bands of all descriptions playing. But as we'll see, what's important to me or became apparent is these other scenes that sprang up around the country, whether it is Lanarkshire or whether it's Inverclyde or Dumfries or Stirlingshire or whatever. And we'll touch on that as we go through. But it was great to get these early punk images. And then, of course, another watershed gig, the Stranglers. Again, it's Peter's photograph at the City Halls, where there was a bit of a rammy, would you say, of some description? And,
I think so, yeah. I wasn't at this gig, but I think... were you at it, Malcolm? Oh, sorry, Malcolm, you're still there. I wasn't at this gig, but there was a big stramash the next day in the paper, the Evening Times, the Daily Record, and all these. Yeah. Punk is banned from Glasgow, says City Provost. Yeah. And it wasn't banned. It was banned from the City Hall, but it wasn't even banned from the City Hall because the Slits played it the next year. Yeah. So so the whole idea of it's banned. Right. If you say something's banned, it's just going to, it's just going to get bigger. So and maybe more underground. But it took a while, I think, to take off and people to accept it. But
that's it.
All of a sudden, there was loads of pubs wanting people, who were into punk rock to play in it, so it was more acceptable. But Glasgow was a wee bit rhythm and booze. It was a lot of the pubs had heavy metal bands doing covers, Stairway to Heaven and all that kind of stuff. Brown Cord and Brown Ale. Brown Ale, sort of guys with beards and all that.
That's it. But the council were pretty sensitive and wary of punk, and there were gigs cancelled, weren't there? Was one up at the Dreamland Cinema where Generation X were supposed to play, and then there was a really good bill with Self Abusers and Exile and the Jolt, and that was cancelled at the last minute as well. So they were, but I think talk of a ban is a bit strong, isn't it? But it made it harder for punks to gain access to things, and things did shift a bit to Paisley, didn't they? Which we'll come back to as well.
Yeah, but I think what happened as well was the university, the bookers for the university, the social secretaries got hip to it. Yeah. So you had to have the Ramones, the GU or the QM. Yeah. You'd have the Blondie, etc. up at the Strathclyde uni. So all of a sudden, the universities, the Glasgow Tech, all these places had fantastic, venues. So. Yeah, it started going to, you get signed in by a student and all that sort of stuff. So maybe it went underground that way if that was underground.
Yeah. And all of those are in the book, of course, as well, these venues. Now, here we are in Edinburgh, talking about this early. This was a tour. Johnny Thunders and the Heartbreakers with Susie and the Banshees and the Models at Clouds. And this is a photograph taken by Lindsay Hutton of the Next Big Thing fanzine. That's a whole other thing we haven't touched on yet, was the importance of fanzine culture for empowering writers and photographers and informing bands that were forming. And here is Rab from the Scars with Johnny and Paul Reiki in the background in the dressing room. And you can imagine from reports the kind of things that went on in Heartbreakers dressing rooms when they hit town. There'd be all sorts of people coming in, and Johnny just looks like he's kind of had enough of the whole thing at that point. But it was a brilliant gig, and they were on fire, as they say at that point, the Heartbreakers. A great picture of Robert there too. So
I think Paul Reiki went on to be Paul Reiki went on to be quite a famous poet.
Yeah,
an underground poet as well.
Yeah. So it's great to get photographs of musicians in all these different contexts with people who are forming bands or just punters, and that's what we wanted for the book. And great image again of that early punk period.
I think the access. Yeah. Sorry, I was just going to say, just to finish off that last photograph, the access, just having access to somebody from New York. I mean, how exotic!
Amazing.
You know what I mean? Or somebody from London, even. It was like, wow, and you could get into the dressing room and they would talk to you and stuff like that. It was amazing. Yeah, really amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can see that excitement in some of the bands. The Prefects were very young at that point. They were Birmingham's main punk band of the period. They're on tour there with the Buzzcocks. They played the Silver Thread in Paisley. They played the Ambassador in Dundee. And here they are at Clouds This is them just larking about in Lothian Road, and that view hasn't changed very much, but we have diary entries from the tour just talking about the different gigs, and you can just see they're having a hell of a lot of fun, you know, and they're still going strong in the form of the Nightingales, and just a great piece of street photography by Helen.
It's great photographs. It looks like they're having great fun, you know, and I think that's the whole thing about touring. You know, if you tour, you're a young person, what a brilliant thing to do, you know, tour, go to different towns and, you know, just listen to people's accents and seeing what they eat. And, you know, that used to be when we started off, when we went to different towns, we used to try and adapt the accent, the local accent, and talk to the crowd in their accent. It was a good laugh. Or, you know, find something that's, you know, specific to that area or whatever, you know, like a bam cake or something, or an Eccles cake.
That's it. And they talk about having pints of heavy in the Shakespeare's pub, which is still there. So clearly they were assimilating at that point. But it's got all the fun of the touring with a great band, of course, like the Buzzcocks as well, learning so much. This is another of my favourite images of the book. And this is Terry, who's nipped off from school in Cumbernauld and gone through to Clouds. And people did go back and forward to gigs, you know, despite what folk might believe, and the animosity, the antipathy between Glasgow and Edinburgh. You know, lots of people came from Glasgow, Lanarkshire, Paisley through to Clouds and vice versa through to Satellite City. And that gig by the Banshees was an early one, and everybody wanted to see it. So, and despite their image, Terry says that they were great and they let them into the sound check and signed whatever they wanted. Just really good to be around. It's just a lovely picture. And Terry's as young as he looks there, you know, it's a classic.
Yeah. But the thing that when we're talking about the Edinburgh Glasgow thing, when I was looking after the Harry Papadopoulos material, I still do, but we were talking about Harry he developed his own stuff. So he would take a picture of Susie and the Banshees at the Apollo, develop them overnight, bake them into 5x8s, maybe 20 of them, dry them, etc., and sell them outside the Playhouse. You know, or vice versa. With the Bowie ones, they played Edinburgh before Glasgow. He'd go to Edinburgh, take the photographs at the Playhouse, and then develop them, 20, 30 of them. And if he'd any excess, he would then sell them in the record shop. So there was a lot of touring and throwing between Glasgow and Edinburgh, because a lot of the bands would maybe only play Glasgow or Edinburgh. Yeah. You know, they didn't always do both. So, you know, a lot of people, and it's where you met a lot of people from the other East Coast as well. Yeah.
That's it. And although I'm from Glasgow originally, I live quite near Clouds, and it's one of the few venues that still stands and don't do gigs, but there's nothing on it to indicate that the Ramones and the Clash and the Rosillos and REM and the Birthday Party, and that, I find that's a bit of a tragedy, because it shows you that, you know, this is really a cornerstone of our culture and our social life, isn't it? Going to music and going to gigs, and the fact that, you know, it's not recognised on the venues, because people really ought to know that, and they were really important culturally. These buildings, most of which have gone or been repurposed.
Yeah, I think so, especially with the amount of Ramones t-shirts you see these days. You know, so you could, you know, my mom's got a Ramones t-shirt. You know, you should at least have a blue plaque. A wee plaque would be nice, actually, wouldn't it?
Absolutely.
You should maybe get. It might be a punk thing to be renegade and make little plaques and stick them up in places.
You should do.
There's a good one that I just saw. It's not punk oriented or whatever, but there's a wee pub called the Old Barns down the bar near the Barrowlands, and they've got a couple. One's for Matt McGinn, the much.
Well, that's fair enough. Yeah.
Loved folk singer, and you know he's never going to get an official plaque, but he's they've made one for him.
Yeah, no, it's great. Absolutely brilliant. But they haven't got one in the postcard flat, for example, have they? And they should have.
They were talking about that ages ago. I think Billy Sloan was trying to do it, but I think he had the Daily Record behind him at that time. He doesn't have that anymore. Yeah. But Billy Sloan started a sort of campaign to get 185 Princess Street, West Princess Street, a plaque for the postcard. You know, but it never came to fruition.
I'm just looking at the time. Shall we zip on through a few more of these, because I don't know how much we want to.
Zip on them.
And well, when I was thinking about the book, the Stagecoach is a venue I remember from, as we all did, leafing through the music press. There always seemed to be gigs there in that late punk period. and it was perfectly situated. And there was a brilliant venue there. It had gigs on a Sunday night, and I was a big fan of the Fall and the Cramps. And we'll come back to that. The Cramps, the original Cramps, played in this little village. It wasn't even Dumfries, it's in Colin, several miles outside Dumfries. And here's the Lurkers outside with David in this brilliant photograph, 1978, of the Stagecoach Motel, as it was. And it was popular with the bands. Simple Minds, I think, said it's the first place they ever played where you got accommodation thrown in. And as you'll know, what a big deal that would be for a touring band going up to 74. So a lovely kind of relaxed image of that time, of an important venue.
Yeah. Well, David, the guy here on the left-hand side, David Thompson, the wee punk rocker that gave you the photograph, he got in contact with us. We were in a wee punk band called Rodeo from Bothwell, of course. And we started playing about the town as we were talking earlier. But people would send you letters and all that. Oh, we are in a punk band from Dumfries, or we are in a punk band from Dunfermline, and we are or Newcastle or whatever. And we used to do reciprocal gigs. So he put on a gig for us with a bunch of other guys in Langham, of all places.
Wow,
Langham Town Hall.
It's a long way.
Langham. It was Langham. Yeah, it's near Lockerbie. So we started, it was before internet and all that. So people would send you a letter. Oh, I hear you're in a punk band. Blah blah blah. I heard you on Street Sounds and Radio Clyde or something. So that was a different way of communicating.
All right, so you knew David. Yeah, right.
Sorry, on you.
No, that isn't that funny. It's a small world, very much. This is another classic crowd shot. Just that kind of thing that I was talking about. The importance of, essentially, you don't need words when you've got the sounds. You know the music, and that photograph places you right in front of Malcolm Owen and Dave Ruffy in clouds with that very distinctive backdrop. That's the sort of stuff I love, and it offers a very different perspective to professional photographer, which you'd have the craft and the equipment and the vantage points. But there's a lot to be said for the kind of, they show each other to best effect, and that's you on the spot, and Malcolm's looking down at you. It's just, it is that moment, and it's indisputable, and I love that about these pictures.
Yeah, it's great. I like the fact he's looking at his hair, and they've got the same haircut. You look at my hair.
Exactly.
I've got the same hair as you.
Oh, they were great.
There's a huge anecdote, but I'm not going to do it right.
Graham McIndoe, another professional photographer from Edinburgh, and I could have chosen any of Graham's pictures. This is a favourite, partly because just thinking about punk as and the number of prominent women in the punk movement and how empowering it was, and Ari Up. And we were chatting the other day and reminded how young she was and the level of scrutiny that would have been on her, how difficult that must have been to handle every moment. People wanting to talk to you, or, and you can read 1,000 things into that expression. And again, Astoria was a great Edinburgh venue that's gone now, but in that late 79 to 81 sort of period, so many good gigs. And it's a lovely picture of a musician in their downtime.
Yeah, I think it's also important the women in punk and the women in rock, or the women in there was quite a few great lead singers, because sometimes you start getting a bit. I was looking at Noel Gallagher's top 10 albums of all time. Somebody sent me it on Facebook or something like that. There's not one woman, and it was the Beatles, the Kinks, the Clash, the Specials. There's not one. There's no women in it at all. But it was a really important thing. I mean, they had a real strong image, and the sound they were developing all these it's kind of like world music. That would be later called kind of reggae-based world music. It was amazing, experimenting. And then they had Budgie, the drummer, playing with them when we saw them at the City Halls. It was amazing. Just absolutely brilliant. But they're really experimenting with different musics, different musics.
There's a lovely, in Viv Albertine's first autobiography, which is a great read, she talks about the White Riot Tour and playing at the Playhouse and describing how it felt to go onto that massive stage as a band who didn't know the rudiments of playing as a band, and extraordinary experience it was for them. And it's well worth a read if people have that. Terrific. Madness, of course.
I've heard great reports on that.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Oh, Madness.
And Chalky Davis, again, a very eminent.
Sorry?
Yep. And what a gift madness were to a photographer. And I didn't realise that I knew this picture, but I didn't realise that these were taken at the Apollo. And again, that's madness almost at the height of that movement that swept playgrounds up and down the country, including myself. You know, they were such a great band and such a great visual spectacle. Great photo.
Yeah, superb. He's a really famous kind of rock photographer coming from the early 70s, working with NME sounds and all that. Yeah, he's very famous.
Just a few more to run through. Simple Minds, of course, at that really interesting period. And I like this picture. It's from a group Derek's taken there. It's an unusual perspective for Tiffany's, which has got a very recognisable interior. And just, it's a classic. It places you on the spot watching them at that early period. And I think it's very atmospheric. It just captures that moment, doesn't it? Of what it was like watching bands at that time.
Yeah.
In that kind of context.
Yeah, the Simple Minds were one of these bands who kind of grew and grew and grew and grew because they had that residency kind of at the Marsh Bar Sunday, I think it was, and they kind of grew and, you know, and it was a thing. Go and see the Simple Minds at the Marsh Bar. I didn't see them until because I was a bit young to go to the Marsh Bar at first, but I saw them in Nashville in London. My brother lived across the road from my older brother, and they were absolutely stunning. Chelsea Girl would just come out, so it was quite, you know. They were just unbelievable. What a fantastic group they were. Yeah. And they continue to be. I recently heard their acoustic album of their greatest hits. And you would think that's not going to work, but it works great. It works really good. Acoustic. Simple Minds, what? But it's great.
Yeah.
Much loved.
Back to Harry, and another Year Zero gig, as what I called it in the book for Glasgow, the co-headline tour with the Fall and the Cramps, and there's like that Clash and Suicide gig, there's a huge mythology has built around this tour, and they played 4 gigs, and this was the third of the 4 at the Tech, and everybody was there, were they not? And it was a sort of remarkable night, and that's Harry's perspective, or one of the shots that I had in mind when I was asking you to give me a couple of things for the book, and a fantastic image of an amazing night.
Yeah, this was probably my favourite gig I was ever at, because the stage was about 1.5 feet high, and this pattern at the back, this green and red, so it looked like a half between a pizza place and a swimming bath. Yeah, you know, it was a weird sort of wee gig. It was the dinner. It was the dino for people who went to Glasgow Tech, and then they turned it into a gig at 8. Very strange. There was kind of plastic tiles at the back, but it was where this is one of the gigs where the audience become the band, because the audience ended up on the stage and they got lost. You know, the band continued to play. The Fall came on first, and then the Cramps just blew the roof off the place. And that roof isn't very high. You can touch that if you're on the stage. You could, you know what I mean? He's quite a tall guy, so it's just about. There's a picture of another picture of him when he's touching the roof, you know, and he's not stretched up. So it's a wee tight gig, but fantastic energy. Yeah. And certainly, it may have been, you know, everybody talks about that Glasgow gig, the Manchester gig when Morrissey was there and blah, blah, blah was there. You know, the Buzzcocks were all there, or they put on Sex Pistols. Yeah. It may have been ours. I don't know. It might have been ours because everybody seemed to be there. Yeah. And it was a bit later, it's 1980, but it's really kicked off post-punk, or what is known as post-punk. Yeah. Or, you know, it's just like, what is that? Yeah, absolutely brilliant performer. Absolutely, the band, they were amazing. As were the Fall. Yeah, was great.
And what's nice in the book, you'll know too in the book that there are photographs taken by Martin as well from different perspectives in the crowd to offer a different, just that, a perspective on the band, and an interview with each band as well. Yeah. So it's a kind of a really cover the bases in terms of the importance of that night for Glasgow and everyone who saw them on that tour.
Yeah, I think the tragedy of a lot of this is if you look at Strathclyde Level 8 or the QM or the GUU or Glasgow Tech, or it was Glasgow Tech's Caledonian University there, but they do not invest in bringing bands or live acts. It's all, you know, get pissed 50 pence a shooter,
Yeah,
DJ
yeah.
Tam. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just a DJ or a set list. There's nothing. It's just, there's no vision because it's cheap. Instead of, because this is where bands used to make money. Bands, certainly made. We certainly made money by doing the university circuit, or in America, the college circuit. And that's where there's a great. It's where music blossoms. It's where music blossoms, But now it's like, get pissed on a Friday at drunk night, 50 pence for a shooter, purple beer or something like that. It's rubbish.
And it was central to your social life, wasn't it? You went to gigs every week, whether it was you were loyal to a venue or
absolutely.
To most gigs, you could just turn up. I mean, obviously the hassle with the tech is you'd have to go in early and hide, or you'd have to get somebody to sign you in. But generally, gigs were affordable.
Yeah. Well, none of us. None of us were students, so we had to get signed in, or you would prearrange. You'd prearrange a student to sign you in, or whatever.
That's it. Here again, just a really interesting, unusual view that conjures a lot of. We were talking about this gig the other night at the Plaza. There were a few big gigs at the Plaza, the late lamented Plaza, and you could see the weight on Bernard's shoulders here of that early tour post Ian and Joy Division, and it's a great picture and just captures aspects of touring and the pressure that he would have felt and bands do feel, don't you think?
Yeah. Well, I think the Plaza wasn't used that much for gigs. I think the Crass had played it, or Crass played it, and these guys played it. Yeah. But this was a kind of change, a turning point. It was the queue was about 2 miles long, and everybody on a trench coat and looked like some sort of demob. Somebody had just been demobbed from the army, and everybody looked depressed. And the Plaza was a cracking old building with a fountain in the middle of it. But it was. Some people say, it was a brilliant gig, it was a brilliant gig, but the sound was terrible. And everybody looked really morose. Everybody was morose. I was looking for a wee bit more, hi, or something,
entertainment.
It just seemed quite dark. But I suppose that was, for some people, that's a good thing. That wasn't really my gig, but I'm sure some people will say, will get back to us and say, McCluskey, you're talking shite. It was the best gig ever.
I bet you're glad you were there, though.
I was glad I was there. I was just an observer, really. Yeah.
Now, I feel slightly guilty skipping over Paisley in a sense, but I thought I need one image because I only had 20 to begin with, and it's very hard to distill that book into 20 images. But I like this one because this is the Bungalow Bar. This is Joe from the band Defiant Pose. And what we can see there behind the legendary Bungalow Bar is gig photographs of all the bands who played there. So you can see Eugene Reynolds and you can see Holly and the Italians and things like that. So a place, obviously they had Silver Thread for a few months in that summer of '77 and then on to the Bungalow. And an amazing run of bands playing there. And it's captured again in the book to give us a flavour of the range of events that were held there. It was quite a place.
But I love that about the book as well. Sorry, I love that about the book as well. The fact that you've got backstage, on stage, off stage.
Yeah.
Somebody pouring himself a pint behind the bar. It's great, and all the memorabilia as well. The ticket stubs. It's a great thing.
It's a great moment in time. Great moment in time.
Yeah, Malcolm, you were going to say something there.
We've run it on. I was just going to say
essential picks you'd like to show now, Chris, before we go over to taking a couple of questions and a lot of comments. Not so much questions, but let's just carry on, but flow through them if you can.
I'll do a speedy wee run through what else we've got, Malcolm, just to see if it triggers anything. Just a great photograph. Yeah. Keith Milne, art school trained, and you can see that. And to me, it just conjures the albums that the Cure did at that time, claustrophobic and atmospheric and kind of ambient, and it's really, really powerful image. Ed Rodian, again, another top venue, still exists, actually, still stands. Birthday party, I've got to mention Night Moves. Ken, you'll have fond memories of playing there and going there, as I do.
Yeah,
party.
Night Moves is brilliant. I love the fact you these little these little you know, like bay sort of round the. It was fantastic. It was really great. You could get really close to the act, and you could actually go behind the act. So I was actually quite nosy because I like being on, you know, like stage things and what pedals the guitar player using or whatever, you know, or what settings the amp at or whatever, you know.
Yeah.
So we used to go behind and look down. I remember going down and watching Nico playing with some of James King and the Lone Wolves, and just working out where we were getting the sounds and all that. It was great, superb.
And just the fact you could just queue up those stairs, and if you got in, you could just turn up and see these bands. There was no tickets, no nothing. You could just go and see Bauhaus or the Birthday Party or whoever it might be. Amazing to think now when you see what a palaver it can be going to see Nick Cave, the very man. What a hassle it would be to get a ticket to go and see him if you could get one now. But
what would happen now would be they would release 100 to the public and they'd keep 300 for Viagogo to sell on secondary ticketing sites. So they would actually keep their own tickets and resell them at a hugely inflated price. Totally illegal. Viagogo, Live Nation, get a grip.
Exactly. This is a venue again that had various incarnations, starting with Gigi's in the punk period, and then Daddy Warbucks, where it was sort of revived for the Splash One Club. This wasn't one of those gigs. It was around that time, though, and the Mary Chain are just becoming the biggest news of that period. And Jim's given us a lot of pictures for the book, fantastic images, and this is one that just captures them in these early days. And you know, very evocative, and so many good gigs at that venue. Sonic Youth, that was their first Scottish gig, again put on the Splash One Club, 1986. Angus has given us a group of pictures of that. So the two perspectives from the Mary Chain and then Sonic Youth from New York.
I think you could actually do another book now. You know, now that you've got this book, you could do another book starting from about this period. You know, and take it right up, because in 10 years it takes you to get it together, it'll be, you know, be like 35 years since, you know, because that's another scene, isn't it? It's like there's a wee film, but the scene in between and all that kind of stuff. It's really important. The Bells Hill scene and Fan Club and, you know, Vaselines and all that, and Jesus Mary Chain. It's the kind of the bastard children of this.
And as you go on, it gets easier to get images. I mean, it's hellish in the 70s trying to find anything, and then as we move on, with every passing year, it gets a wee bit. Now, we've got to mention the Clash busking tour, haven't we, in the Rock Garden? There were various gigs played in Glasgow and Edinburgh, various venues visited. The Rock Garden is probably the best known one, would you say?
I actually missed this. I worked in the Rock Garden, but I worked in the Rock Garden in 1980. And Bluebell's second gig was in the Rock Garden. But they had a great wee bit downstairs. I'm not sure if this is upstairs or downstairs. That looks like it's downstairs. But it had been a restaurant, and it didn't really work. The restaurant didn't really work. It's called Rox, R-O-X. So this looks as if it's down there. But I was away. I think I was a Bluebell at this point. I think I was away in Germany or something like that at this point. But everybody, you know, they've got a plaque, and they've got, you know, we're talking about the plaques. The blue plaque thing. They've got a plaque. They've got a plaque in the other gig they did, which was in Old Dumbarton Road, which is called
Dukes. Was it Dukes?
Somebody tell me the name of the band. Dukes. It's in Dukes. So they've got a plaque. Well, they had a plaque up until about 3 weeks ago. Guess what happened? Somebody nicked it.
He's knocked it.
The Clash played here, and it was a cracker. It was really cool. Somebody nicked it, didn't they?
God.
Yeah, it's just like, you know, like Malcolm had an exhibition on rock against racism and all that, posters. Sid Shelton and all that, and somebody came in to street level and stole the posters. What's the point? You know, I mean, what's the point? You know? Exhibiting something. You know? Yeah, they did actually. Yeah.
Desperate. Yeah. Right, there can't be too many left now. Again, maestros, we could talk all night about these venues. Each had their own story to tell. Another of Simon's images. I think this is
when it became more dancey, more electronic, sort of more new romantic-y, dancey, sort of post-punky New wavy, yeah. And there's Liana Marletta there on the right.
Yeah.
Frank to Hollywood, yeah.
And it's a kind of glamour about that picture that's generally missing from the book, I would have to say. So I was determined to have, if ever I found any glamour in inverted commas, it was going in. Billy Mackenzie was no stranger to a bit of glamour either, was he? Billy and Paul Haig here, and it's a classic, No Pictures Please, by John, who's given us a group of pictures.
A lovely man, very unusual person, really lovely spirit of a man. He came to pick me up to go and see The Simple Minds one night in a Rolls Royce, but it was, have you ever seen a knackered Rolls Royce? A Rolls Royce, but it was completely fucked. It was blue, but it had a yellow door because they trashed one of the doors, and it was, all the seats were slashed and all that. And he couldn't drive, so he got his pal to drive it. But that's another story.
Oh my God. So that's
a lovely man, God bless him.
Amazing talent, yeah, exactly. This was the cover of the book. Again, lots of reasons, but we talked about Inverclyde briefly. Janie's and Gourock, another legendary venue. And I just think this is such an unusual. I wanted, again, it's the human interest. It's part of the appeal for me is that could only really have been taken at that moment in time. It's 1984. You've got that cross section of styles, the very distinctive pipe work in the ceiling of anyone who was ever in the venue will know it. The meteors, of course, it's a great photograph, that one, of an important venue.
Yeah, I think we were just mentioning that whole point that it gets missed out a lot as well because everything's the Glasgow music scene. There's a lot of fantastic music came from Inverclyde, Greenock, Gourock, Port Glasgow, and Janie's was a cracking wee venue. It was brilliant, part of a kind of Art Deco sort of hotel. Yeah. The Bay Hotel, I think it was, but you know, you got the Cuban Heels, you got the Stingrays, you got the Shaking Pyramids, you got Davey, you got loads of Stevie Ritchie's bands, like Prefab Four, and really amazing musicians, really brilliant musicians.
This is just a great picture, a really unusual picture. Again, at rooftops from one of those little on the mezzanine walkway, and anyone who's ever seen a band of that order will know that this is the sort of way the Meters following had a particular way of showing their appreciation, knocking 7 bells at each other, and it's just a great image and a really rare one to capture. It's like a kind of, whether it's the Bash Street Kids or some kind of old master drawing of a battle scene, limbs sticking out and elbows and knees and boots. Just it's the sort of thing I really loved when I did see it.
It was quite
have it. Yeah, moment in time.
It was all quite macho, that scene, wasn't it? Sort of psychobilly sort of thing.
Very much so.
Yeah, and then it went to America with the straight core. What's that? You jump into a mosh pit and knock lumps out of each other, but you don't drink, you don't smoke, you don't take drugs.
Aye, that's just a one, isn't it?
I think they just get too much WWW wrestling.
Yeah, exactly. Still got more images, so stop us, Malcolm, if we're going on too long here. I could talk all night, but a classic image, another moment in time. It's the Barrowlands, it's the Smiths Q, 1985. You've got the posters for Struts, posters for Smiths. A friend of mine from school standing in the middle of the photograph, and every Saturday morning we would go down the bars and buy records and things like that. So a great resonance for so many people, and happily the Barrowlands going strong, but super photo. Chosen as a great image, really. Posters, Divine, the crowd, the glitter ball. Again, John, professional photographer at the Music Press in the 80s, gave us this great body of work. So, cracking thing. The last one of the group, Ken, Aberdeen, the venue, a much loved gig. And this is an unusual one because Colin's camera was passed to Anya, the singer, who took the photograph of the crowd, and we get this really unusual effect. She was a much more photographed
brilliant
person, and just a great image, a really unusual thing that we had to have. So that's the end of the image selection. So Malcolm, shall we hand back to you, or where should we go from here?
Well, that's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. What
that.
a summary of a couple of decades of time and great commentary upon it as well. There's a few people watching that I should mention here. Russell Irvin, your bandmate from the Bluebells, has been watching this. Ken, Ronnie Simpson.
Get well.
Ronnie Simpson was one of the early bookers of bands at the Apollo. He's tuned in. His daughter Kim Simpson let him know about that. He first started off doing music and cabaret events, before the early days of the Apollo, in actual fact. But he was the guy who introduced the Apollo Award trophy for bands that sold out. So it's great that he's tuned in as well. John Zip from the Zips, he's been watching as well. A few other people. Rev's been watching. Sandy Blair said, I was at the Kinema gig. It wasn't violent at all, but there was a bunch of skinheads from Livingston, I'm told, who caused a bit of trouble. Derek Loudon said the Glasgow gig, however, was very edgy. And Derek Loudon took the Simple Minds photograph that you showed earlier on, Chris.
Yep.
So he's been watching.
Hi, Derek.
Well.
Hi, Derek.
Somebody else here, Sid Ozalid, said he supported the Clash in '82 in Inverness. The punks were all old school and spent their time gobbing at me.
Oh.
In 77, 78, that was a compliment, but by 1982, it maybe meant something else.
No.
Tam Coyle asks, what bands would you put on a Clouds plaque? I think you maybe mentioned a couple at the time, Chris. What bands would you put on a Clouds?
That's a good one, Tam. That's a good one. Yeah. What would be the top of maybe the Ramones be right up there, wouldn't they? The Clash?
Well, I'd put the Bluebells for one. Bluebells should have their own one. Not unbiased.
No.
We certainly played there.
Yeah.
Yep.
With Haircut 100.
With Haircut 100. Brilliant.
Yeah. Well, we're the sport band.
Yep.
Yeah.
So there you go, Tam. Go and get it sorted.
Yeah.
Some great compliments coming in here. Paula Larkin said your book is brilliant.
Thank you, Paul.
What else? Paula Larkin.
Thank you, Paula.
Let me just check the questions here. Someday, Gavin Patterson. I hosted the gig when we placed the Matt McGinn plaque at the old Barns.
Right.
Didn't expect to get a mention.
Yep, great.
There you go.
What else have we got here? There's probably quite a few more that I've missed because I'm trying to look at Facebook at the same time here. Somebody did say earlier on, Alan Kelly, that you missed out Sparks in 1975 at the Apollo, which was his first gig. But if we start getting into what fell through the cracks here, it would make another few books.
Yeah, brilliant one.
Yeah, you mentioned, Ken, you've got the start of another book there, which is like the late 80s.
Well, I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you could add really Sparks. Sparks are a band I've always loved. I love Sparks. I've never seen them live. No. I just think they're fantastic. I love their music. But in the new book that you're doing, you could do a picture of Sparks with Franz Ferdinand because they had FFS.
Oh yeah,
They got together and made an album.
Yeah.
It was FFS, so you could get a picture of them all together. So we'd bring the Glasgow element into it as well.
Definitely, Sparks.
There is a guy who has got a good Instagram site called Graham Gavin, who's been posting a lot of stuff which is kind of 90s, like Yummy Fur and all those types of bands, really interesting. Yeah. Graham Gavin he's called.
Yeah,
that'd be good there.
Stephen Watt asks, what made the Mary Chain so explosive compared to the other punk bands that came before them? I don't know who's that's directed at.
Well, I think the fact that I think the Jesus Mary chain had they were a wee bit younger, maybe young for original punk. I think maybe one is my age or whatever, but they're maybe a couple of years younger. But they got the idea and spat it up and chewed it out and created their own kind of thing, you know, and with the feedback and chaotic gigs and gigs that lasted 5 minutes and 10 minutes, and so it was quite confrontational. I think they were quite confrontational to the audience, and that was part of the attraction. People wanted to get the piss taken out of them or whatever, you know, or people were looking for a riot basically, and they would certainly start the riot. And I think they were very good at it. I like their music, but the live thing is hard. It's hard to keep together without. We can all easily go crazy and smash the place up, but you'll not be asked back. You know what I mean? If you go to a party and you smash it up, or if you set fire to your mom's house, you'll not be allowed back. They were really going for that kind of thing, and we're notorious. And you can only live in your notoriety for so long, I think, until it's not workable. You'll be banned. I think people won't let you in the gig. That kind of thing. So they were very punk. They were very punk rock. But
I think there was it wasn't a generation of people who were ready for them, but the people who were too young for punk, like me, I remember punk, I was too young. And they had a new sound. It was definitely, and they had good songs, and there was a lot of stuff went along with it, some of which they chose, I think, and some of which they didn't. But it was a very powerful kind of moment in music. I seem to remember in that first single when that came out, and then the album was so strong. But yeah, they were everywhere, weren't they?
Yeah. There's a guy called Alan Clark has just posted saying Malcolm took me to see Blue Oyster Cult at the Apollo. And I think that was me. Alan used to live next door to me in Les Mahago. Was Hughie Clark with a huge pigeon duke it out his back garden. That must have been 1978 or something like that. Yeah. So I was just looking at the ticket last night, and it was like $250 to go and see Blue Oyster Cult at the time.
Malcolm, was that not the one where Japan supported them? That was
Well, it might have been
legendary gig.
I wouldn't have known Japan. No, I wouldn't have known Japan at the time, or maybe it was late. Who knows? Who knows?
78. No, I think they did.
Yeah. Somebody else is asking Anne-Marie King, who were Scotland's main punk rockers?
One thing I was
main punk rockers.
Well, we did the Skids. Skids were brilliant. The Rosillos, who were kind of sci-fi punk. Simple Minds started off as a punk band. Bluebells started off as a punk band. That's how we called Raw Deal. That's how we met Bobby Bluebell. He had a fanzine called 10 Commandments, and he interviewed us in the Mars Bar, which had become the Countdown. But really the Skids don't get a lot of credit, as much credit as they should do. The Jolt. The Jolt were the first. James King, Lone Wolves, or any of the Fun Four. Orange Juice were a punk band called the New Sonics. The New Sonics. So they all Aztec Camera were a post-punk band called Neutral Blue. Yeah. So they all started off in punk rock and then changed their name or whatever, and but there was a whole bunch. And then all the Edinburgh bands, Joseph K, all of them, lots of bands. Of course, they Exploited. Yeah. The second wave of punk.
What about the question? Did maybe they mean the faces of the time? Who sticks in your mind as the faces, Ken, of the punk movement in Glasgow?
Well, the faces, I would say, people like George Fiden, who's in the second photograph you showed, because he was Mr. Punk. He looked the part, and he had all the gear, and and George's pals was people like the Cowards. There was Parky, a guy called Parky, who was like a brilliant guy, John Park. Right, and he was a lovely big guy, kind of on the hippie punk sort of thing, and he was really cool to wee guys like us, because if somebody tried to beat us up for not having the right haircut or whatever, he would help us. There was Max Maxwell, who went on to be the singer of the Alex Harvey band and all, you know, the
Edith and the Ladies.
Sap.
Yes.
Edith and
Edith
the
and the
Ladies.
Ladies. There was a guy called Willie Sinnott who was in Edith and the Ladies. There was loads of different people. I mean, they didn't all look like punks probably, but
No.
they were kind of faces at the time. And then you had all the Paisley guys, John Zipp, who's still doing the punk band. Yeah. You've got Arthur Haggerty, who worked very closely with Disco Harry to put on the gigs in Silver Thread.
Yeah.
Arthur worked in Bruce's record shop. Yeah. Again, came from the hippie fraternity, befriended the punks. So loads of older hippies became friends of the punks, and they helped you get into pubs and put on gigs and arrange things that you couldn't do yourself because you're too young. So there's a whole bunch. But I'd say Parky was the king punk. I love him. God bless him.
Yeah.
Parky.
Yeah. Do you know a guy called Gordon Mackenzie, Ken? Gordon Mackenzie?
Yes, I know the name.
Why is Ken so handsome? So I don't know.
I mean, just tell him I've been dyeing my beard grey, my hair.
Steal the whole show here. But Jim Barr. Don't know exactly what I'm referring to, but he says that's why it's so difficult to get the Daddy Warbucks shot. Nearly got flogged by the bouncers. That was one of the images you'd shown.
The Mary Chain one, cracking.
Yeah. It's a great photograph. That.
Yeah,
sure is.
Yeah. So, any more questions, folks, before we wrap it up, or listen to Chris and Ken chat a wee bit more for another minute or two?
We can do that, sure.
We've got 81 people left in the audience. It's going up and down.
What did we peak at? What did we peak at, Malcolm?
It was, we can't remember, 114.
Brilliant.
I think it was.
Good. Yeah. Thank you all for
12
coming.
Dozen.
Fantastic.
So
I really enjoyed it.
If you want to come off of screen share there, Chris, could you?
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
So the book itself never.
Yes.
If you wanted to see its tangibility, right? You're talking about 500 pages here. Right?
Yeah.
It's 2,000. There's 2,000 images in this book.
Yeah.
500 pages. I mean, it's a must. I'm pretty sure this book is going to sell out. So and let's
so far.
Let's hope that it does. Yeah.
So far.
Ken, give us a plug for last night in Glasgow, could you?
Well, yeah. Before we go, so we're doing this gig. It's bizarre. So we had a whole bunch of gigs organised in the rabbit hole. This is us, the Bluebells, right? During the summer, and obviously they're all cancelled because of the COVID thing. However, the people who put on SWG3, the promoters, and the label, the cooperative label, Last Night from Glasgow, check them out. They've got a fantastic website. I've got together, and they've worked out a way that we can have a gig in the galvanizers yard in SWG3. Now, this is a gig where it's picnic tables, 33 picnic tables that can hold a maximum of 6. You have to have two different households or two different bubbles. Okay, so you could have your I don't know. It's probably going to be more children friendly. There's 2 gigs. One starts at 1 o'clock. One starts at 6 o'clock. It's £60 a table. However, it's a tenner per head if you can get 2 groups of people. It's quite hard to get 2 groups of people, but you could bring your Wayne or whatever, or your granny or whatever, right? They're also doing a new deal, which is a table of 4. So if there's 2 couples, you can pay, I think it's £40. But if you go on the website Last Night from Glasgow, the details are there. Okay, and that's on Sunday. This Sunday coming up. It's a kind of experiment, as a health and safety experiment. When you get to the gig, you'll be ordering drinks on an app, which you get when you buy a ticket. There'll be Lola and Slacks who will be headlining. We'll be on in the middle, myself, my brother David and Robert, as the Bluebells acoustic, and a special guest who's John McCluskey, the impresario fiddle player, also from Bothwell. And we'll also have Mark Georgeson, who's an artist on from Coatbridge, who's on Last Night from Glasgow. So it's this Sunday. Look up Last Night from Glasgow website and you'll get details. Okay. I'll post them on your website. I'll post the details on Street Level website after this. And Malcolm, if you share, that would be great. So there's still tickets available. I think they've sold out about 3/4 of the tickets. But if you want something to do Sunday afternoon, Sunday the 4th, Low and Slacks are a fantastic band. Us, we're quite good. And Mark Georgeson. It works out at 10 and a head. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, great stuff. But I hope not to, I mean, as if this isn't enough, Chris, but let's say that this is part of a continuity, and really looking forward to seeing what comes next. So this will remain up on Facebook, folks. So Chris and Ken, you might want to have a look at the comments or the questions that you can then contribute to. Just another wee plug there, Ken. I'm sorry, but the first Bluebells album, Sisters, is coming out in November, I do believe, released by Last Night in Glasgow.
Yes. Well, Last Night from Glasgow we found out that our records are owned by London Records forever and 70 years after we die. Okay, so London Records is bought by Warner Brothers, who was bought by Sony, who were then bought by Universal. They just keep on cutting chunks off, but we're forever indebted. We're indentured slaves, basically. So a French label have now bought our copyright to our songs, and they're going to give us a nice deal. They're going to let us put the recordings out if we give them a wee bit of money, and we're going to put it out on a label called Past Night from Glasgow, which is a branch of Last Night from Glasgow. And Last Night from Glasgow are going to start doing re-releases of stuff is deleted. So we've got the album, we've got the original tracks, and we didn't really like the way the original album went, so we changed 2 or 3 mixes, all from the same time, but they're just certain mixes. You know, there was one mix we called it the Shakin' Stevens mix because it sounded like Green Door of Everybody Somebody's Phil. We hated it. We were in Germany at the time and they put it out. We did it for a laugh. It's not on it. Okay, we've taken it off and changed it with a mix that we liked and we recorded ourselves at the time. So we've added 2 tracks as well, just for value for money. If you buy it through Last Night from Glasgow or Monorail, there's a fanzine which has been put together by Stephen Pastel from Monorail. And there's also a flexi disc of Kath, Whoa Whoa, by King Creasel. It's fantastic, okay? It's a great package. You can get it from Last Night from Glasgow website or order it from Monorail Music. They've got a good website. You can get it in green, blue, red, yellow. I don't know. There's loads of them. There's a limited edition. There's 5 different colours, and we're using the colours on the sleeve. So the sleeves are the world sort of thing, and it's blue, green, red, yellow, pink. So there's one of each. There's limited editions of each colour. So it's all very nice. It's a great package, and well worth 20 quid.
Yeah.
That's a brilliant plug, Ken. Brilliant plug.
Thank you.
But so thanks again, folks. Last word for Jim Barlow. You know, said what a brilliant way to spend a Thursday night. Special thanks to Chris for all your hard work. So we'd like to thank you as well for pulling this book together, which brings things from the past back to the surface yet again in terms of increased relevance.
In a good way.
Any last word, Chris?
I don't think. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you all for your time and your interest and your enthusiasm. I've loved it. So thanks all for listening.
You can pick up a copy in Street Level's shop. You can order a copy via Chris as well and through us. We'll just share the website and the details again very shortly. So on that note, we'll say good night to you all. So thanks very much, everyone, for joining. Cheers.